Hi everyone, this is a very short video looking at the exam. I'm recording this the day before the exam, so I'm recording about 3:30. So I've done another video on the reading exam. I'll put it in the link below. So doing a very quick video saying what you need to know for tomorrow if you're doing your short story. So remember, you'll go into the exam, it's 45 minutes, an hour and 45, but the 45 minutes is the short story. You'll go in there, you'll have 4 random titles. If you've been in my class, what we've tended to do is we've done a couple of drafts of different kind of stories. So hopefully you'll be able to pick one, because especially A and B, if you look, normally in this they have 2 vague ones and then 2 more specific ones. So the vague ones here, A and B, you could write anything about really, and C and D are a bit more specific. So hopefully if you're in my class, you've got a couple of ideas of what you're going to do, and you'll be doing that in the exam. If you have to do one totally off, out randomly, then you have to do that too. So you pick one of these and then you put this at the top of your page as your title. Okay, so first person, so I would say you should be writing, this is just my tips, just my advice as a teacher. I think you should be using I, so I wouldn't be talking about he and she. I'd be the first person because it's easier to write, it makes it more exciting, gives it a bit more pace. How long should your story's plot be set over? Again, my advice, I would say tomorrow you should be setting your story over a few minutes. So you're almost describing a few minutes of a story. Remember, a light-hearted story, so we don't want anything to do with like a few days later, a few weeks later, or 10 years later, or anything like that. It's meant to be a short little story, quite light-hearted, set it over a few minutes. It will also make it easier for you to write, and it makes it more exciting and interesting to read for the examiner. Again, another tip, my advice, set your story in the past using past tense. So not I walk or I'm going to walk, but I walked, I ran, she said, she replied. Almost in your head, you can make sure, maybe talk about the story as if it was yesterday. Again, this is from a spelling, punctuation, action, grammar point of view. It's easier to do it in the past. What this means is you won't get mixed up writing the present tense and the future tense. If you do it all in the past, it should be easier for you. The 4 parts of the story are beginning, problem, climax, and ending. Okay, so that means that the beginning, you're setting the scene. So maybe if you're doing a page and a half or 2 pages you'd be looking to do, you're setting the scene, so a couple of paragraphs introducing the characters. Maybe a good thing is not giving away straight away what you're going to talk about. So some of my students have talked about doing a story about going into a shark cage. So maybe you set the scene, you talk about being lowered, you talk about a life jacket being pulled up. Maybe you make the reader work a little bit and don't just say straight away what's happening. Then you need a problem, something happens to complicate the lives of the characters. So maybe we are in the shark cage, maybe it's introduced that the cage isn't shut properly. Then the climax would be what happens at the big point. So for example, the shark puts his nose in but then goes away at the last second. And then the ending we go back to normal. We talked about this being a James Bond film before, so beginning would be James Bond is in a casino somewhere. The problem would be someone wants to take over the world. The climax is James Bond stops the person who wants to take over the world, and the ending is James Bond goes away with the Bond girl and it's all back to normal. So remember, you can do a cliffhanger, an open ending, but generally things start normal, a problem happens to disrupt it, the problem is solved, and we go back to normal. Should you include dialogues of people speaking to each other? Yes, but only a little bit. So we don't want to look like a play. So maybe include 3 or 4 sentences of people speaking to each other, but we don't want too much more than that. What's the word count? It's 500 to 550 words, so you're looking for 2.5 pages. The examiners do say anything under a page and a half is going to really struggle to get a good mark. So 2 to 2.5 pages. Which of the sentences below is a show not tell sentence? So this means we don't want any boring sentences telling us about what someone's feeling. So we don't want anyone saying, I was bored, I was embarrassed, show me that physically. So for example, this would be C. So instead of telling me the man was bored, you're showing me physically. So he yawned, he looked at his watch. Instead of the man being embarrassed, you could say his cheeks went red. So you're showing me instead of telling me. Do you have to use one of these titles at the top of your page? Do you have to write it? Yes. So if you chose the choice, for example, at the top of your page, you would put the choice and underline it. Okay, sensory language, we want to use that. So what the person sees, touches, hears, tastes, smell. Putting that in will create imagery in the reader's mind and makes it feel like they are there. In particular, I would try and do this in your introduction to get the reader really involved straight away. Okay, remember we want correct punctuation all the way through, particularly for dialogue. So remember, all the dialogue and punctuation goes inside the speech mark. So for example, wait a minute, comma, speech mark. said Rob. Then I open up again. Don't I know you from somewhere? Question mark, speech. Remember, at the end of each speech mark, so for wait a minute, you can't just have nothing. You've got to have either a full stop or a comma or a question mark. Tips to revise for tomorrow. If you're someone who's already written a bit of a draft of a story, I would practice writing that. Again, if you're someone who's written a bit of a mock, I would get a highlighter and I would highlight the first line of each paragraph and revise that line. So that means going into the exam, you probably know what each line, each sentence your paragraph is going to start with. And number 3, maybe try to come up with create an interesting opening sentence. One trick with this is maybe using a rhetorical question. So I read one of the students' work and they started the sentence with, I can't, what the hell was I thinking? Straight away draws the reader in. Remember tomorrow, 45-minute exam, 2 to 2.5 pages. Make it interesting, make it light-hearted. First person, sell it over a few minutes and try to do it in the past tense.